So there actually were about three other points that I wanted to make about race. The first one is that it's definite that the black-skinned Congoids Fitzpatrick 6 people are more closely related to gorillas than the other races. And that's genetically, evolutionarily, and probably also with regard to intelligence. So the real question is, how long will it take for a scientist or scientists in general to work out the underlying genetic basis for that? It shouldn't be too difficult, but to really go and analyze the genes properly to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt. On the other hand, the white Caucasian population, Fitzpatrick 1 specifically, and maybe some of the 2s, are more closely related to the rhesus macaque monkey as compared to other races. The Asians are probably also have some relations there too, but and it's mainly because those populations, the rhesus macaque, the white Caucasians, the Asians, went far enough north. Those two I'm definite on. And with the rhesus macaque, they might already have the genes isolated well enough to prove that. I'm pretty sure when it comes to white populations, they have a lot of that stuff figured out before they do it for the non-whites and the blacks. The other ones that could be compared but are a little fuzzy, but based on colors, there might be something to it. And that is the orangutans being related to Indians on some level, and that also has to do with geography too, and where the orangutans got to and where the Indians eventually settled also. I'm specifically talking about the Indians of India. But yeah, that one's a little fuzzy, and might be one that people think of as distasteful, but there might be some truth to that, a lot of truth to that beyond just observing phenotypes and color. And then the other one is that the Asians, they're probably a little bit more closely related to the chimpanzee, but I'm not completely sure about that one, but I think that one's possible too. But the two that I'm pretty definite is that the whites are more closely related to the rhesus macaque, and the black Congoids, Fitzpatrick 6s, are more closely related to the gorillas. Skin color is one clear reason for that. Eye color and iris color is another. Concentration of melanin is another. And eumelanin, that's another reason. And those are and even the hair types. Those are some of the reasons why it's pretty clear that that's the way it is, and that's the truth. So that's the point one. Point two is that, race. Why is race as a term looked down upon by some of the scientific community? The real reason has to do with two things. So these are the last 2 points. One, when scientists really started describing race and describing other humanoid or human-like things, including blacks and some non-whites, they didn't consider them to be humans. And I'm pretty sure the expectation was that there would be these big differences between these blacks and these whites, bigger genetically different than what they could have ever expected. They were expecting massive differences amongst the races, specifically between white people, white Caucasians, and black niggers. Well, that's the most apropos word in that way, in that statement. So that it's very clear who I'm talking about. not the blacks, because sometimes they consider Greeks to be blacks. Sometimes they consider Jews to be blacks. So I'm not talking about those populations. I'm specifically talking about the Congoids, who have been written up as niggers in the literature, in books, and even in probably things that a lot of people still aren't privy to, because I'm pretty sure there's some private stuff that are hard to get to. Might be even in public communities, but like, for instance, getting books from Dublin, not so easy. Getting books from London, a little bit easier, but still not always so easy. Getting books from Australia, not so easy. South Africa, not so easy. It takes a lot of work. So for the most part, it ends up being a little more private than, just finding everything on the internet. All right, but anyway, the point is, and also notes. I'm pretty sure a lot of scientists have notes that, aren't always public, at least initially, or doctors, or even lay people. But, so yeah. So I think, the first reason is that the scientists, which were really white people, most of them were white, Germans, British, probably Irish, American whites, Canadian whites, Australian on some level, South African whites. I mean, these groups, their expectation, and then obviously parts of Europe, must have really, and the Asians even participated in this on some level, but the expectation, I'm pretty sure, was that the difference would have been really big, and they would have isolated a lot of genes, not just like 72 or so is what they have now. When it comes to all the color genes, there is probably more than 72, meaning color not just amongst humans, but other animals and even plants. But when it comes to humans, it's at least 72 or so. So approximately, and I guess there are estimates that there's 8% of the variation is due to race-specific genes or something. There's other different types of estimates. It's not easy to figure it out, because for me, a lot of it ends up being like a secondary analysis as opposed to a primary analysis, or even a tertiary or quaternary analysis. But I know the information's there. I know the companies, even like Ancestry.com, 23andMe, MyHeritage DNA, and some specific academic places like in Germany, here in Boston, in Toronto, London. I know those places have some of this type of information, but they don't necessarily, and it's probably available publicly somehow, but it's not always the easiest thing to access. But yeah, anyway, so I think that's the reason. One reason why race is looked down upon by the scientific community, because when their expectation is that, 50% of the genes would be different between whites and blacks, for instance, but then they only find an 8% difference, they, become uneasy about trying to figure out how to explain that. And the truth is that the race genes just might not be as significant as they used to think. But it doesn't mean it's dwindled to the null. And I know that's not the truth either. It's definitely not dwindled to the null. So we're really getting a serious number for how many genes are race-specific, and, not just focused on skin and skeletal system and eye color, but also focused on the genetic differences by race of the different organ systems, the cardiac system, the heart, the lungs, the pancreas, the stomach, the spleen, the liver, the intestines, colon, rectum, the genitalia, testes, ovaries, things like that. I know there are probably going to be some subtle genetic differences there too. I just don't know how easy or difficult that will be to find. I'm pretty sure it won't be easy. I know it won't be easy for me, but I'm pretty sure it won't be easy for most people. Maybe we need a German. So, having said that, the third reason why race is so taboo is because when people say race, it immediately leads them to racism. I'm going to do another vlog specifically on racism, so you can understand my viewpoint or my take, my perspective on racism, not just on race. But this one specifically is on race. And so to finish up that third point, I think a lot of scientists just don't want to be considered as racist. And when they use the term race, they usually start to get labeled as a racist. My take on racism, everybody's a racist, so who gives a shit? Who cares? If it's true, it's true. You might as well defend the point and really get to the point. And if you have to make it work for humanity, go ahead. If you don't have to, then just put your information out there properly instead of, putting all that bullshit about race not being real, specifically the anthropologists like Nina Jablonski and whatever people. That's just some bullshit. But so with that race thing, instead they've now started to use ethnicity. It just goes right back to race. It's just a spawn from race to ethnicity. When you say ethnicity, it implies race, and really the genetic basis of race, yet again. But, the people who aren't smart enough to know that they're now, again, talking about race, don't realize, and, don't really start calling them racists. So, I understand why, but I know it's still wrong to deny that race is genetic and a result of evolution.